Some features in today's cars feel like they exist just to drain your wallet. Sure, they do something. On paper, they sound clever, efficient, even necessary. But in real life, they bring more hassle than value. You take the car in for a fix thinking it's over, only to find out it's just the beginning. Because once these systems start acting up, they rarely stop at just one visit ever again. Active Grille Shutters. Here's the first feature. At first glance, active grille shutters sound like one of those tiny modern upgrades nobody asks for and nobody notices. They sit behind the front grille of the car, quietly opening and closing on their own, depending on what the engine needs. When the car does not need as much cooling air, they close to help the vehicle slip through the air a little more cleanly. When more cooling is needed, they open up and let air in. That is the whole promise. No buttons, no drama, no effort from the driver. Just a small system doing a small job in the background, helping the car feel a bit more polished, a bit more efficient, a bit more thought through. And honestly, when it works, it is fine. That is the trick with features like this. They are not flashy. They do not make you fall in love with the car. They just quietly help the car behave a little better every day. And most drivers never even think about them. That is exactly why they feel so ridiculous when they fail. Because this thing has one job. One, open, close. That is it. And somehow even that becomes a problem way too often. The real issue is not the warranty. It is not some magic countdown hidden in the car. It is the fact that this weak little system lives in one of the worst places possible. Right at the front. Right where all the dirt road grime, rain, mud, loose leaves, pebbles, and random junk get thrown first. Right where a tiny bump, a low curb, a rough road, or even just years of daily use can start wearing things down. So now you have this delicate little moving part trying to act smart while living in a place that is basically a war zone. And that is the part that gets irritating fast. You look at it and think seriously. This is what is causing the warning light. This flimsy little set of plastic flaps. This weak, fussy, overprotected nonsense. The car itself still feels solid. The engine still runs, the wheels are still turning. But now this little front-end gadget decides it is tired of life, and suddenly you are the one stuck dealing with it. It feels cheap. It feels petty. It feels like the kind of problem that should not exist on something this expensive. Worse, it is not even a feature most people would call essential. Helpful, yes. Nice to have, sure. But necessary? Not really. If it disappeared tomorrow, most drivers would never say, wow, the soul of this car is gone. They would just keep driving. Maybe the car would be a little less efficient. Maybe it would lose a bit of that extra polish, but it would still be a car. That is what makes failures here feel so annoying. It is not important enough to love, but it is important enough to inconvenience you. The best thing you can do is treat the front of the car with a little more attention. If you drive through heavy rain, dirty roads, or roads full of debris, do not assume the front grille area will always sort itself out. If the car has had even a small front-end bump, get it checked. And if a warning shows up, do not ignore it for months just because the car still seems fine. With features like this, small problems stay small only when somebody deals with them early. Panoramic Sunroof. Next is something that looks gorgeous, feels expensive, and makes a car seem instantly more special. A panoramic sunroof does not make the engine stronger or the steering sharper. What it does is change the whole mood of the cabin. Light pours in. The roofline feels less heavy. The car stops feeling like a sealed box and starts feeling open, airy, almost a little luxurious. On a cool morning, it makes the interior feel fresh. At night, with city lights overhead, even an ordinary crossover feels a little more dramatic. That is why people love it. It makes the cabin feel brighter, bigger, and more alive. It is one of those rare options that passengers notice right away. They look up, smile, and the whole car suddenly feels a class above itself. And that is exactly why it is so painful when it goes bad. Because when a panoramic roof fails, it does not fail in some dramatic, heroic way. It fails in the dumbest, nastiest, most insulting way possible. Water. A clogged drain. A bent hose. A seal that shifted a little. Some tiny hidden part that was supposed to quietly move water away suddenly does not. And now your beautiful glass roof has turned into a leaking ceiling problem on wheels. That is what makes it so maddening. You spend extra money on a feature that is supposed to make the car feel premium, and it falls apart because of something this stupid. Not the engine, not the transmission, not some major mechanical disaster. A drain, a seal, a little path for water. Seriously. And the symptoms are awful. Not dramatic, awful. The headliner starts looking blotchy. The pillar trim feels damp. The seatbelt is cold and slightly wet when you grab it. The carpet under your foot has that soft, humid, disgusting feel that tells you immediately something is wrong. Then the smell shows up. That trapped, moldy, stale smell. Not strong enough to punch you in the face. Worse than that, it just sits there. Sour, dusty, damp, ugly. It makes the whole cabin feel dirty even when the car looks clean. It turns a nice interior into something that feels old, neglected, and cheap. And if you are alone, it is irritating. If you are with someone else, it is embarrassing. You open the door for a friend, a date, a coworker, even a client. And now you are silently praying they do not notice the smell, the dampness, or that faint stain near the roof. That is the insult here. You bought it to make the car feel more upscale, and it ends up making the whole thing feel shabby. Then comes the repair bill, and this is where the anger really sets in. Because the cost is ridiculous. A sunroof leak repair can run into the hundreds very quickly. And if the shop starts talking about removing the headliner or replacing larger parts of the assembly, the bill can climb toward $1,000 or more. In some cases, owners have reported repairs around $1,900. And that does not even guarantee the smell is fully gone afterward. That is insane money for a feature that is basically there to make the cabin feel nice. That is the whole scam of it. You do not just pay extra to get the panoramic roof, you also risk paying a stupid amount later just to keep that fancy feeling from turning into a wet, moldy mess. The smartest move is to react early. If you smell dampness, see a stain, hear water moving above you, or notice the windows fogging more than usual, do not wait. Deal with it while it is still a small drainage problem, not a full interior problem. And if you love the airy feeling but do not want the risk, there is a simpler answer. Go for a car with a light-colored interior, larger side windows, and a cabin that already feels open. A lot of people do not actually need a giant glass roof. They just want a car that feels less closed in. Touchscreen. Sunroof looks unnecessary the second you see it. But this thing is worse. It looks absolutely essential, like the beating heart of the whole car, when in real life it is often less practical than it pretends to be. In some cases, it can ruin your day faster than a flat tire. I am talking about the touchscreen. At first, it feels brilliant. It is the glossy command center sitting right in the middle of the dash, and on many modern cars, it controls almost everything. Music, maps, phone calls, climate, vehicle settings, cameras, drive modes. On some cars, it even reaches into things that used to have their own simple controls like wipers, mirrors, lights, and defrost settings. That is why people get attached to it so quickly. You tap one place and the whole car seems to respond. It feels clean, futuristic, and weirdly satisfying. You finish changing a song, then jump straight into climate, then tweak a vehicle setting all on the same surface. That convenience is real. That is why this feature has become so powerful. But this is also where the stupidity begins. Because no matter how polished it looks, it is still electronics. And electronics are simply not as forgiving as old physical controls. They live with heat glare, vibration, dust, moisture, software bugs, memory wear connection, failures, and constant daily use. So what exactly did people think was going to happen when they handed half the car to a glowing slab of glass? Why should a driver need a healthy touchscreen just to do things that used to take one blind reach and one solid click? Consumer Reports says in-car electronics are one of the fastest growing problem areas in newer vehicles. And these issues often reflect the built-in design and quality of the system more than maintenance habits. That is what makes it so infuriating. It is not even a rugged part. It is a stressed, overheated little computer pretending to be a dashboard. And when it goes bad, it does not always fail gracefully. Sometimes it just takes half your normal routine hostage. If you have a Tesla Model S or Model X from the EMC recall era, when its touchscreen has serious trouble, it can take away the rear-view camera display, affect defrost and defog settings, and remove important chimes and alerts. That is not a minor inconvenience. That is your morning getting hijacked because a screen decided to age badly. If you have a newer Subaru with one of the big integrated screens, owners have reported cases where the head unit failed and climate control stopped working through it. So now picture the timing. You are late, it is raining, the glass is fogging up, you need the backup camera, you need airflow, you need the car to behave like a car. And instead, you are staring at a dead or glitching screen like an idiot whispering prayers to a black rectangle. Then comes the bill. And because this thing now matters so much, the price is absurd. Tesla's official infotainment upgrade has been listed around $1,500 to $2,000. An OEM Subaru display panel has carried an MSRP of about $1,604.33 before labor. For perspective, a full set of 4 performance tires can cost around $1,817.80. So yes, you can get very close to 4 new tires money just trying to bring one stupid screen back to life. That is the whole joke of modern car design. It looks modern, but one failure later, you are living very modestly. The line between modern and modest is thinner than your wallet after paying for it. That is what older cars got right. They were not as slick, they were not as elegant, but the radio could fail and the heater still worked. A bad display did not drag climate cameras and settings down with it. One part broke. The rest kept going. So how do you live with this now? If your car already uses a touchscreen for everything, deal with glitches early. Lag random reboots, blank screens, ghost touches, weird connection dropouts, do not shrug those off. And if this whole setup feels too fragile, too fussy, too overcomplicated, then yes, there is a real argument for going back to something older or simpler with proper physical controls. It may not feel as futuristic, it may not look as clean, but it often feels a lot more under your control. Automatic start-stop. The next one I want to talk about is automatic start-stop. The reason is simple. It saves too well, it cuts fuel, then it feels like it also cuts your time, your patience, and whatever energy you had left that day. You already know what it is. The system shuts the engine off when the car stops for a moment, then starts it again when you are ready to move. On paper, it sounds smart. Less fuel burned at red lights, less waste, cleaner air. A more efficient car doing the responsible thing while sitting still. Fine, great, wonderful. The problem is this thing cannot really stand on its own 2 feet. It depends on too many other things being just right. The battery has to be healthy, the battery sensor has to read properly, the cabin temperature has to be in the right zone, the electrical load cannot be too high. A lot of little conditions have to line up before this so-called helpful feature decides it is in the mood to cooperate. And that is exactly why it gets so irritating. Because what kind of practical feature is this if normal daily life is enough to throw it off? Too hot outside, it gets fussy. Too cold outside, it gets fussy. Using the air conditioning, it gets fussy. Running errands on short trips, it gets fussy. Driving in traffic, stopping and creeping like millions of people do every single day, it gets fussy. That is the joke of it. This is supposed to be a clever efficiency feature, yet it depends on a perfect little fantasy world where the battery is strong, the weather is mild, the car is happy, the cabin is settled, and nothing unusual is happening. Meanwhile, in real life, people are driving in heat, rain, traffic, stress, and short commutes. So of course this thing ends up acting weird. And when it starts having trouble, the whole driving experience gets ugly. The car feels lazy, hesitant, awkward. You stop, wait, and then the restart comes back with that little delay or that clumsy stumble that makes the whole car feel cheap. The smoothness disappears. The flow disappears. Everything starts feeling choppy and reluctant, like the car is arguing with itself before it moves. That is what makes this one so annoying. You buy a modern car because you want it to feel smoother, quieter, and easier to live with. Then one overcomplicated fuel-saving feature comes in, and suddenly the thing responds like a grumpy old machine. Not broken enough to fully fail, just rough enough to ruin the mood every time it happens. And yes, sometimes it gets worse than that. If you have an Acura MDX or TLX from the years affected by the auto idle stop issue, one of the problems reported was simple and infuriating. The vehicle could enter idle stop, then fail to restart automatically the way it should. That is not a cute little ecotech hiccup. That is the kind of problem that makes you stare at the car in disbelief at exactly the wrong time. So what do you do with a feature like this? First, do not cheap out on the battery. That is one of the fastest ways to make this system even more irritating. Second, if the feature starts acting inconsistent, deal with it early instead of pretending it is just having a bad day. And third, if you already know you hate this kind of over-dependent technology, then honestly skip it next time. Pick a car without it. Save fuel in calmer ways. Drive smoother. Keep tire pressure right. Keep the car maintained. That may be less clever on paper, but it is a lot less exhausting in real life. Turbo direct injection engine. This is where the promise gets really seductive. A smaller engine, more power, better fuel economy. A car that feels eager when you step on it, but still looks smart and efficient on paper. That is the sales pitch behind turbo direct injection engines, and to be fair, it is a very good one. It sounds like modern engineering at its best. Less bulk, less waste, more punch, more efficiency. The kind of setup that makes you feel like the car is giving you extra without asking for much in return. That is the dream. The problem is that this kind of engine often asks for more than people realize. Direct injection sounds clean and advanced, but one of the big downsides is that it does not keep things naturally washed the way older setups often did. Over time, carbon starts building up where you do not want it. Not where you can wipe it. Not where you can casually inspect it. Deep inside, slowly, quietly, layer by layer. And that is what makes this so irritating. You buy a newer engine because it is supposed to be sharper and smarter, and then one day it starts acting like it has soot packed into its throat. That is not a dramatic failure. It is worse than that. It is the kind of problem that creeps in. The idle gets rougher. The throttle response gets a little duller. The car hesitates a bit more than it used to. It starts to feel less clean, less crisp, less eager. You press the pedal, and instead of that smooth, modern pull, you get this slightly clogged, slightly lazy response that makes the whole thing feel older than it should. Not dead, just off. Just annoying enough to keep reminding you that something is not right. Then turbocharging adds its own layer of stress, because now the engine is not just trying to stay efficient, it is also running hotter, working harder, and depending even more on good oil, good maintenance, and good habits. That is the part people forget. A turbo engine is not just a regular engine with a little bonus power sprinkled on top. It is a more demanding machine. It likes the right oil, it likes clean oil, it likes maintenance done on time. It does not love neglect cheap shortcuts or the kind of casual carelessness people get away with on simpler engines. And the most frustrating part is this normal life is often enough to make it grumpy. Short trips, stop-and-go traffic, cold starts, cheap fuel, delayed oil changes. Daily driving that is not abusive, just ordinary. That is what makes this whole thing feel unfair. You do not have to mistreat the engine to make it unhappy. You just have to use the car like a normal person. Run errands, sit in traffic, drive 5 or 10 minutes at a time, fill up wherever is convenient. That is all it takes for the gap between great on paper and tiring in real life to start showing. And because this is the engine, not some side feature, the irritation hits harder. When a screen goes bad, your day gets worse. When a roof leaks, your car feels shabby. But when the engine itself starts feeling rough, hesitant, and clogged, the whole car loses its dignity. That is the real cost here. You paid for modern efficiency, and what you got instead was a machine that can feel brilliant when everything is perfect, and strangely high maintenance when life is not. So the only sane way to live with an engine like this is to stay ahead of it. Use the right oil. Change it on time. Do not cheap out on fuel quality. Pay attention when the car starts feeling slightly off instead of waiting for it to become a real problem. And if all of that sounds exhausting, that is because, honestly, it can be. Some engines are just more forgiving. This usually is not one of them. After all, modern cars are not bad. They are just different. Smarter, faster, more efficient, but also more sensitive, more demanding, and sometimes a little less forgiving than they used to be. The goal is not to fear these features, but to understand them. Because once you know what you are dealing with, you stop being surprised and start being in control. Choose what fits your life, not just what looks impressive on paper. A car should make your days easier, not quietly complicate them.